My name is Chip, and at 34 years old, I finally achieved my dream of owning a beautiful home overlooking Puget Sound in Seattle. It took years of hard work as a software engineer to afford it. I have always been the responsible sibling, while my sister Heather constantly took advantage of my generosity. But when she planned her massive birthday party at my house without even asking permission, she crossed a line I could not ignore. So I flew to the Maldives and watched remotely as police officers shut down her chaotic party. Before I dive into this wild story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments, and hit that subscribe button if you have ever had to stand up to entitled family members. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Chicago. My parents were hardworking people who often juggled multiple jobs to make sure we had everything we needed. They taught me the value of hard work, determination, and responsibility from an early age. While other kids were playing video games, I was learning to code on our family computer, fascinated by the possibilities of technology. As the older brother to Heather, who was 3 years younger, I naturally fell into the role of the responsible one. I would help her with homework, protect her from neighborhood bullies, and generally look out for her well-being. My college years were tough but rewarding. Unlike many of my classmates whose parents could afford their tuition, I worked nights and weekends at a local tech repair shop while maintaining a full course load. I was determined to graduate without crushing debt, which meant sacrificing many of the typical college experiences. Meanwhile, Heather attended a different college where she seemed more focused on socializing than studying, frequently calling me for money when her allowance ran out before the month did. After graduation, I landed my first job at a promising startup in the technology sector. Those early years were brutal, often working 70-hour weeks to prove myself and secure my position in the company. While my friends were traveling and enjoying their 20s, I was building my career foundation, moving strategically from one opportunity to the next. Each job change came with more responsibility, better pay, and valuable experience. All the while, I was saving aggressively, living well below my means with the singular goal of someday owning my dream home. Last year, after nearly a decade of dedicated saving and career advancement, I finally found it. A modern 4-bedroom home in one of Seattle's most desirable neighborhoods, with floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased breathtaking views of Puget Sound and the Olympic Mountains. The moment I walked through the door, I knew this was the place I had been working toward all those years. The price tag was steep, but I had prepared for this moment. I spent months customizing the house to my exact specifications. The home office was designed for optimal productivity with my complex 3-monitor setup, ergonomic furniture, and perfect lighting for video conferences. Each piece of furniture and artwork was carefully selected to create a space that was both comfortable and inspirational. I invested in a state-of-the-art home theater system for my rare moments of relaxation and a kitchen that would make professional chefs jealous, despite the fact that I barely had time to cook. Perhaps my favorite feature was the comprehensive smart home system I programmed myself, allowing me to control everything from lighting to security with custom applications. My parents had retired to Florida after decades of hard work, and I made sure to stay connected through weekly video calls. They were proud of what I had accomplished, but sometimes worried that I worked too hard. I had naturally fallen into the role of family problem solver, the person everyone called when they needed advice or, more often, financial assistance. I never minded helping out when I could, but my relationship with Heather had grown increasingly complicated over the years. Heather had developed a pattern of entitlement that began in childhood and only intensified as we grew older. While I was building my career with focus and determination, she bounced from one job to another, never staying long enough to build anything substantial. Despite her modest income, she insisted on living a lifestyle that was well beyond her means, accumulating debt and frequently finding herself in financial emergencies that only her big brother could solve. The list of incidents where she had taken advantage of my generosity was long and frustrating. There was the time she borrowed my car for what she claimed was a job interview, returning it 3 days later with a mysterious dent and an empty gas tank. Or the Christmas when she used my credit card for emergency groceries that somehow included $300 worth of designer clothes. The most egregious was perhaps when she asked to stay at my previous apartment for 2 weeks while her place was being fumigated. A stay that mysteriously extended to 2 months with a revolving door of her friends visiting at all hours. These past few months had been particularly intense at work. I was leading a major project that could potentially revolutionize our company's main product, and the pressure was immense. I had recently installed a comprehensive security system with cameras throughout my property, partly for peace of mind during the long hours I spent focused on code. My plan was to have a month of uninterrupted work from home, taking advantage of my perfect office setup to maximize productivity. A recent promotion had made me more visible within the company, and the upcoming product launch was largely my responsibility. The last thing I needed was any disruption to my carefully structured environment. It was during this critical period that I received an unexpected call from Heather. We had spoken only minimally in the months since I had finally put my foot down about lending her more money, so her cheerful greeting immediately raised my suspicions. "Hello, favorite brother of mine. How have you been?" "I miss you," she said with unusual warmth in her voice. We chatted for a few minutes as she asked detailed questions about my work schedule and upcoming plans, which I answered vaguely, already sensing some ulterior motive. Then came the real reason for her call. "So, Chip, I was thinking, my 30th birthday is coming up in 2 weeks, and I want to do something really special. Your house would be perfect for a small gathering. Could I possibly borrow it for one evening?" I took a deep breath before responding. I explained that I was in the middle of a critical project at work, that I needed my home office for uninterrupted productivity, and that I really could not accommodate a party at this time. I offered to help her find an alternative venue, or even contribute financially to renting an appropriate space. To my surprise, Heather seemed to accept my decision with uncharacteristic grace. "Oh, I understand completely. Your work is important. Do not worry about it. I will figure something else out." As we wrapped up the call, she slipped in some subtle guilt about how this was her milestone birthday and how she had so few opportunities to celebrate, but I stood firm. Still, after hanging up, I could not shake a lingering sense of unease. Heather had never accepted no so easily before, especially when she had her heart set on something. 3 days later, I was in the middle of an important virtual meeting with my project team when my phone buzzed with a text from my neighbor Tom. "Hey Chip, just checking if everything is okay. There are moving vans outside your house and people carrying in what looks like party decorations. Renovation project I did not know about." My first thought was that there must be some mistake. Perhaps they had the wrong address. With a growing sense of alarm, I quickly pulled up my security app while attempting to stay engaged in the meeting. What I saw made my blood run cold. The first camera showed Heather standing in my driveway, directing people as they unloaded equipment from a rental truck. The second camera revealed 2 men I did not recognize rearranging my carefully positioned furniture in the living room, pushing my expensive sofa against the wall, and rolling up the custom rug I had imported from Morocco. The third camera showed what appeared to be catering staff measuring counter space in my kitchen and discussing setup options. The timestamp on the footage showed that this activity had begun just hours after our phone conversation. While I had been working 70-hour weeks and sleeping barely 5 hours a night to meet my deadlines, my sister had been plotting to use my home anyway, completely disregarding my explicit refusal. I immediately excused myself from the meeting, claiming a household emergency, and called Heather. She answered on the third ring, her voice casual as if nothing unusual was happening. "Oh, hey, Chip. What is up? What is up?" I repeated, struggling to keep my voice level. "I am looking at my security cameras right now. Why are there people in my house moving my furniture?" There was a brief pause before she responded with a dismissive laugh. "Oh, that? It is just a few decorations for the party. Nothing major." "What party, Heather? I explicitly told you that you could not use my house." As the conversation continued, the full extent of her plans gradually emerged, each revelation more shocking than the last. This was not the small gathering she had initially described, but an elaborate celebration with professional catering, decorators, and a DJ. She had disregarded my refusal entirely, using the spare key I had given her for emergencies to access my home. "I thought you were just being modest," she said. "Your house is perfect for my milestone birthday. You are always working anyway, so I figured you would not even notice if we used it for one night." The most stunning revelation came when I pressed her about the timing. It turned out that she had sent out invitations a week before even calling me, knowing that I would likely refuse but counting on family pressure, and a sense of obligation to force my compliance once everything was arranged. Even more outrageous, she had actually been charging her guests for what she called exclusive venue access to help cover the costs of the event. As my shock turned to anger, her attitude shifted from casual dismissal to defensive hostility. "Well, it is too late now," she snapped. "Everything is paid for and people are coming. You will just have to deal with it." While still on the phone, I quickly searched her name on social media and found what she had been hiding from me. She had created a public event that had gone viral among her friends, with over 300 people marked as attending. The description read, "Epic mansion party at my brother's place. Professional DJ, open bar, and unlimited party till dawn." The comments section was filled with people asking if they could bring additional friends, whether overnight stays were possible, and if the hot tub would be available. She had tagged the location with my exact address, completely violating my privacy and security. The photos she had posted were taken during her last visit, showcasing my home as if it were her own. This was not the classy gathering she had tried to describe during our call, but what appeared to be shaping up as a wild house party with hundreds of strangers. "You need to cancel this immediately," I told her firmly. "This is my home, not a party venue. I did not give you permission, and I am not giving it now." Her response was both shocking and sadly predictable. "If you ruin this, you will be the bad guy, not me," she threatened. "Everyone already knows about it. My friends have taken time off work, and some are flying in for this. Do you really want to be the one who destroys my birthday?" Before I could respond, she escalated further. "And by the way, my boyfriend knows people at your company. It would be a shame if this affected your perfect reputation at work." It was at that moment I realized that reasoning with her was pointless. She had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed, violating not just my property but my trust in a fundamental way. I ended the call with her still yelling justifications, my mind already racing to consider my options. Over the next several hours, I continued monitoring the security feeds while attempting to focus on my work obligations. What I saw only deepened my concern and sense of violation. A professional sound system was being installed in my living room, with speakers powerful enough for a nightclub positioned throughout the main floor. My carefully chosen art pieces were being removed from walls and stacked carelessly in a corner to make room for party decorations and lighting. Most disturbingly, I observed people entering my bedroom and home office, moving personal items and rearranging furniture to create what appeared to be additional party space. Someone was systematically going through my liquor cabinet, making an inventory and adding bottles they had brought. Early guests were already arriving, taking selfies in my private spaces and posting them online with captions like "just arrived at the mansion" or "party of the year about to start." I watched in growing horror as Heather conducted what appeared to be house tour for some early arrivals, opening doors to rooms that contained personal documents and belongings. I could hear her voice clearly through the security system as she gestured around my living room. I practically own the place anyway, considering how much I have helped him with decorating advice. Desperate for some family support, I called my parents in Florida. Surely they would understand the severity of the situation and help me reason with Heather. Their response was deeply disappointing. "You know how important birthdays are to your sister," my father said with a sigh. "Cannot you just let her have this one night? It is her 30th, after all." My mother chimed in, "You always were too private about your things, Chip." Would it really be so terrible to share your good fortune with your sister and her friends? I tried to explain that this was not about being selfish or unwilling to share. It was about basic respect for my home, my explicit refusal, and my right to decide who enters my private space. But their perspective had been shaped by years of enabling Heather's behavior, always expecting me to accommodate her wishes regardless of the personal cost. Be the bigger person, my father advised before ending the call. You have always been the responsible one. That is just how it is. I felt more isolated than ever, realizing that even my parents could not see the fundamental violation of boundaries that was occurring. They had unwittingly contributed to Heather's sense of entitlement over the years, and now I was facing the consequences alone. As the afternoon progressed, the security system alerted me to even more concerning developments. Unknown individuals were testing different entry codes on my garage door, apparently trying to gain access to additional spaces. I observed someone attempting to disable one of the exterior cameras, covering it briefly before another person suggested they leave it alone. Through the microphones, I overheard conversations about bringing extra friends who were not on the original guest list, with someone saying, "He will never know, the place is huge." Social media posts tagged with my address showed people displaying substances that were clearly illegal, with comments about plans to use my hot tub and pool area for after-party activities. One post included a detailed layout of my home with designated areas for different activities, exposing intimate details of my private space to hundreds of strangers. My professional life was also beginning to feel the strain of this crisis. Important work emails were piling up as I dealt with the unfolding situation. I had a critical deadline that same weekend for delivering key components of our project, and my boss had sent a message checking on my progress. A colleague needed urgent access to files stored on my home computer, and I was struggling to focus enough to help them remotely. The realization that this situation could potentially affect my career was adding another layer of stress. I was experiencing physical symptoms of anxiety, acid churning in my stomach, and a tension headache building behind my eyes. I felt trapped between my personal crisis and professional obligations, unable to fully address either. Meanwhile, Heather had launched what could only be described as a campaign of manipulation. I discovered she had contacted several mutual friends and more distant relatives, asking them to pressure me into accepting the party. My phone was filling with text messages from people I rarely spoke with, all suddenly concerned about my apparent selfishness in not wanting to host my sister's birthday. Heather had also taken to social media, posting a thinly veiled message about how some people have everything but cannot share even a little with family, painting herself as the victim and me as the villain. Her friends were commenting with supportive messages and sending me direct messages about doing the right thing. The final straw came when her boyfriend called, ostensibly to mediate, but actually to deliver veiled threats about my professional reputation. He casually mentioned knowing several people on my company's board, and wondered aloud how they would react to hearing about my treatment of my sister. The complete disregard for how this manufactured drama might affect my career and reputation was stunning. As I watched more people arriving at my house through the security cameras, I realized that this situation had escalated beyond anything I could have anticipated. My home was being invaded, my privacy violated, and my character maligned, all because I had dared to set a boundary and say no to my sister's unreasonable demands. My first impulse was to immediately call the police and report the unauthorized use of my property. However, as I considered the potential consequences, I realized that an immediate confrontation might actually play into Heather's narrative of me as the villain trying to ruin her special day. The situation required a more strategic approach. I spent the next hour researching laws regarding unauthorized use of property and consulting with a lawyer friend about my options. I carefully documented all communications with Heather, saved screenshots of social media posts about the event, and compiled video evidence from my security system. I wanted to ensure that whatever action I took would be legally sound and defensible. My friend confirmed what I suspected. I was well within my rights to have unauthorized guests removed from my property, especially given the evidence that I had explicitly denied permission for the event. He also advised me about potential liability issues if someone were injured on my property during an unauthorized party, particularly with the evidence of prohibited substances and overcrowding. I contacted the non-emergency police line to establish a record of the situation, describing the unauthorized entry and planned activities without requesting immediate intervention. I also notified my security company about the potential unauthorized event, ensuring they were aware of the situation and prepared for possible escalation. A quick call to my insurance company confirmed my suspicions that any damages from an unauthorized event would likely not be covered by my policy. With all legal bases covered, I needed to decide on my course of action. As I weighed my options, an idea began to form. Instead of rushing home to confront the situation directly, what if I went in the opposite direction? The thought of physically removing myself from the chaos while maintaining complete control of the situation was appealing. I began researching remote locations with reliable internet access where I could monitor the situation and execute a response from afar. The Maldives had always been on my bucket list, and a quick search revealed a resort with private overwater villas equipped with high-speed internet. A check of flight availability showed an option departing in 6 hours that would get me there well before the main event was scheduled to begin. While the idea might seem extreme, it offered several advantages. I would have the peace and space to handle both the party situation and my work obligations without the emotional strain of being physically present for the confrontation. I could observe and document everything remotely, maintaining complete evidence of any property violations or damages. And perhaps most satisfyingly, I could regain control of the situation on my own terms, rather than being forced into the role of the villain showing up to shut down his sister's party in person. I immediately set about enhancing my remote access capabilities to all home systems. I tested camera feeds, ensuring I could view every angle of my property from anywhere in the world. I created automated security protocols that could be activated remotely, including announcements over the home speaker system and selective control of doors, lights, and other features. I developed a precise timeline for when and how I would intervene for maximum impact. On the technical side, I programmed a special security mode specifically designed for this party scenario. This included backup power and internet connections to ensure I would not lose access, automatic evidence collection protocols to document any damages or illegal activities, and emergency response options that could be triggered remotely if the situation deteriorated beyond acceptable limits. I methodically tested all systems before finalizing my plans, ensuring everything would function perfectly when needed. Recognizing that I might need some local support, I reached out to my neighbor Tom, explaining the situation and asking if he would be willing to be my eyes on the ground if necessary. He was understandably shocked by Heather's actions and readily agreed to help, expressing his own concerns about the potential disruption to the neighborhood. I made arrangements with my security company for physical response if needed, providing them with documentation of my ownership and explicit instructions about unauthorized use of the property. I contacted the local police precinct to inform them about the potential disturbance, establishing a relationship with the shift supervisor, and ensuring they had all necessary information if intervention became necessary. I left specific instructions with my property manager about assessing and documenting damages after the event, and briefed a trusted colleague on the situation to cover any work contingencies that might arise. With all physical presence requirements addressed, I felt a growing sense of regaining control over the situation. My personal preparations were equally thorough. I packed essentials for an unexpected trip, including everything I would need to continue working remotely. I secured valuable and irreplaceable items in my home before leaving, moving them to a locked storage area that was not accessible with the spare key Heather had. I set up a complete mobile workstation that would allow me to meet my project deadlines regardless of location. I also had to prepare myself mentally for the family fallout that would inevitably follow. This would likely be a defining moment in my relationship with Heather, and possibly with my parents as well. I was determined to finally establish firm boundaries, even if it meant fundamental changes to these relationships. Years of accommodating unreasonable demands had led to this breaking point, and I was resolved to chart a new course. Before leaving, I took one last look at my home through the security cameras. Decorations were being hung from my vaulted ceiling, tables were being set up in my carefully designed living space, and strangers continued to move through my private rooms with casual disregard for my property and privacy. The sight strengthened my resolve. Without telling anyone my destination, I quietly locked the door behind me and headed to the airport. The journey to the Maldives was long, but gave me valuable time to finalize my plans and center my thoughts. After connections through Dubai and Colombo, I arrived at the small island resort where I had booked an overwater villa. The contrast between the chaotic invasion happening at my home and the tranquil turquoise waters surrounding my temporary retreat was not lost on me. I quickly set up my command center on the villa's spacious deck, testing all connections and control systems before settling in to monitor the situation. The time zone difference worked perfectly in my favor, placing me 13 hours ahead of Seattle. This meant the evening party would unfold during my morning hours when I would be fresh and focused, rather than exhausted from travel. There was a certain irony in watching the unauthorized takeover of my home from a paradise location. As I connected to my security system and saw the preparations continuing in full force, I felt a calm determination replace my earlier anxiety. I was no longer reacting to Heather's actions, but executing a carefully considered plan on my own terms. The first guests began arriving in the early afternoon Seattle time. The camera at my front entrance captured a steady stream of unfamiliar faces entering my home, many carrying gifts or bottles of alcohol. Heather made her grand entrance about an hour into the gathering, wearing what appeared to be a new designer dress and greeting guests as if the property were her own. The crowd grew quickly, soon exceeding even the 300 people mentioned in the online invitation. The professional DJ had set up an elaborate system in my main living area, with speakers positioned throughout the first floor and extending onto the deck. The catering staff appeared overwhelmed by the unexpected numbers, with the food that had been prepared for a smaller group rapidly disappearing. Alcohol was flowing freely throughout the house, with impromptu bars set up in several locations, including my kitchen and home office. People were accessing every area of my home, including spaces that should have been locked and private. The atmosphere was rapidly evolving from a social gathering to something more akin to a nightclub, with the volume and energy increasing by the minute. As the evening progressed, I observed the first signs of concerning behavior and potential damage. A group had gathered around my grand piano, placing drinks directly on its polished surface, despite the coasters visible just feet away. Someone had spilled red wine on the custom carpet in the dining room, and rather than cleaning it, they had simply moved a chair to cover the stain. The situation continued to deteriorate as the night went on. Through the security cameras, I observed what appeared to be illegal substances being shared in several locations throughout my home. A group of guests I did not recognize had moved my living room furniture to create a dance floor, dragging my expensive leather sofa across the hardwood and leaving visible scratches in its wake. People were entering my private office and bedroom in increasing numbers, with some trying to access my computer and others lying across my bed taking photos. I watched in disbelief as someone attempted to connect their device to my home theater system, carelessly handling the expensive equipment I had meticulously installed. Drinks were being spilled on carpets and furniture throughout the house, with little effort made to clean up the resulting damage. The overcrowding was creating increasingly hazardous conditions, with exits becoming partially blocked by groups congregating in doorways and halls. Through all of this, Heather was visible at the center of the party, accepting gifts and congratulations, seemingly oblivious to or unconcerned by the destruction occurring around her. She made no effort to direct guests away from private areas or to prevent damage to my property. In fact, she appeared to be encouraging the increasingly wild behavior, at one point leading a group tour through my private spaces. The turning point came just after midnight Seattle time. Through the bedroom camera, I observed a guest accidentally knocking over and breaking a piece of art that had particular sentimental value, a glass sculpture given to me by my mentor when I received my first promotion. Almost simultaneously, another camera captured someone attempting to access my secure home office where confidential work materials were stored. In the living room, the security system registered the unmistakable sound of breaking glass, followed by laughter rather than concern. The outdoor cameras showed people attempting to access my hot tub despite the covers being locked in place, with one person suggesting they cut through the material. It was clear that the situation had moved beyond simple unauthorized use of my property to active destruction and potential theft. The fire safety concerns were also becoming critical, with exits blocked and far too many people crowded into spaces not designed for such numbers. I took a deep breath, surveyed all the camera feeds one final time to confirm my decision, and activated the protocol I had prepared. With a series of commands entered into my remote system, I executed my plan. Instantly, all interior lights throughout the house switched from their normal warm glow to a pulsing red, creating an immediate change in atmosphere. The music system cut off mid-song, replaced by an automated announcement that played through every speaker in the house. Attention! This is an automated security alert. This event is unauthorized. The property owner has not granted permission for this gathering. Police have been notified and are en route. You have 15 minutes to vacate the premises before law enforcement arrives. All activities are being recorded for evidence and identification purposes. Simultaneously, security doors automatically engaged, securing sensitive areas of the home including my office and master suite. All exterior lights activated to full brightness, illuminating the property and anyone attempting to leave. The sprinkler system activated in exterior areas only, not causing interior damage, but making the outdoor spaces significantly less appealing for anyone thinking of continuing the party outside. The announcement repeated at 1-minute intervals, along with a countdown of the time remaining before police arrival. I had indeed contacted the local authorities, timing their response to coincide with my announcement for maximum impact. The cameras captured the immediate chaos and confusion that followed. There was a moment of stunned silence before people began grabbing their belongings and rushing toward the exits. What had been a celebratory atmosphere instantly transformed into a scene of panic, as guests feared potential legal consequences. The exodus was rapid and disorganized, with people pushing to get out through the main doors and some even attempting to leave through windows or side exits. Through it all, I could see Heather standing in the middle of my living room, her expression cycling through shock, rage, and disbelief. She pulled out her phone and began frantically attempting to call me, but I had temporarily blocked her number as part of my plan. Her increasingly desperate attempts to regain control of the situation were futile as the crowd continued to disperse around her. Just as the 15-minute countdown completed, police vehicles arrived as scheduled. The officers entered with professional calm, asking for identification from the few guests who remained and questioning Heather about her authorization to use the property. When she was unable to provide any proof of permission and the officers confirmed my ownership, they proceeded to document the unauthorized entry and visible damages. The final guests were escorted out by the authorities, leaving only the evidence of destruction in their wake. Empty bottles, food waste, and damaged furniture filled the spaces that had been so carefully designed and maintained. Through it all, I watched from my peaceful villa, feeling a complex mixture of sadness at the violation and vindication at having successfully defended my boundaries. As the situation stabilized and the police completed their report, I made the decision to extend my stay in the Maldives while arrangements were made for cleaning and repairs. This would give me time to address both the physical damage to my property and the emotional aftermath of this family crisis, all while continuing to meet my professional obligations from a place of tranquility rather than chaos. The immediate fallout began within hours of the party's dramatic conclusion. My phone filled with notifications as Heather launched a barrage of calls, texts, and voice messages. Her communications followed a predictable pattern, starting with anger and accusations of betrayal, shifting to threats about family relationships and professional consequences, and finally descending into desperate pleading and attempts at guilt manipulation. "I am going to tell everyone what you did. How could you embarrass me like that in front of all my friends? This is unforgivable." Read one of her first messages. Hours later, the tone had changed. "You know I can make things difficult for you at work. Was it really worth ruining our relationship forever? Think about what this will do to Mom and Dad." By the following day, she had shifted again. "Please, Chip, I did not mean for things to get so out of control. I will make it up to you somehow. Just talk to me." My parents predictably called to express their disappointment in my actions. My mother was particularly upset, focusing entirely on Heather's humiliation rather than the violation of my home and boundaries. "How could you do this to your sister?" she demanded. "Everyone she knows saw her get thrown out of that party. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that was for her?" My father, while more measured in his response, still placed the burden of reconciliation on me. "You could have handled this differently, son. Family should come first, even when it is difficult." Social media exploded with perspectives on the incident. Many of Heather's friends posted angry comments about the party being shut down, some even tagging my workplace in an apparent attempt to cause professional embarrassment. Others, particularly those who had witnessed Heather's pattern of behavior over the years, reached out privately to express support for my actions and acknowledgement of the difficult position I had been placed in. The property manager I had arranged to assess the damage reported back with sobering news. The total estimated cost of repairs and replacements exceeded $15,000. There were scratches on hardwood floors, wine and food stains on carpets and upholstery, broken glassware and ceramics, damaged electronics, and even structural damage to some walls and fixtures. The security company provided a detailed report documenting multiple policy violations, including tampering with security devices, unauthorized access to restricted areas, and exceeding safe occupancy limits. The police report confirmed unauthorized use of the property and noted evidence of prohibited substances, creating a formal record of the incident. My insurance company was initially reluctant to cover the damages, citing the unauthorized nature of the event. After consulting with my attorney, I began the process of seeking damages directly from Heather, beginning with a certified letter detailing the costs and requesting payment for repairs. Her response was a counterclaim alleging emotional distress and damage to her reputation, along with vague assertions that I had somehow given implied permission for the event. My attorney advised documenting all previous incidents to establish a pattern of behavior, which I did methodically, creating a timeline of boundary violations that stretched back years. As weeks passed, the family division became increasingly apparent. My parents initially sided completely with Heather, accepting her version of events without question. Extended family members split into factions, with some understanding my position while others bought into the narrative that I had overreacted to a simple birthday celebration. I had several difficult conversations with my parents about their role in enabling Heather's behavior over the years. These discussions were painful but necessary, bringing to light long-standing patterns that had contributed to the current situation. Gradually, my father began to recognize the unfairness of their expectations. After seeing photos of the damage and hearing the full story from my perspective, he acknowledged that Heather's actions had been beyond reasonable boundaries. "Son, I had no idea it was this bad," he admitted during one call. "We should have been more supportive of your position." My mother remained more resistant to this realization, continuing to defend Heather's actions while minimizing the violation I had experienced. Her perspective was deeply ingrained after years of making excuses for Heather's behavior, and I recognized that this pattern might never fully change. After careful consideration, I made the difficult decision to limit contact with family members who continued to dismiss my boundaries. This included temporarily restricting communication with my mother, until she could acknowledge the legitimacy of my position. It was painful but necessary for my own well-being and the establishment of healthier relationship dynamics moving forward. Professionally, I also faced some repercussions. As Heather had threatened, rumors did circulate in certain professional circles, requiring me to address the situation with my boss and key colleagues. Fortunately, those who knew me well understood the difference between personal family drama and professional capability. Had a complicated family situation, I explained simply to my manager. My sister held an unauthorized event at my house that required police intervention. I apologize for any distraction this might have caused. My boss, to his credit, was supportive. We all have family complications, Chip. Your work speaks for itself. Some colleagues who had heard versions of the story from mutual connections were more difficult to navigate. I found myself having to carefully explain my side without appearing defensive or bringing personal drama into the workplace. I maintained professional distance from those who seemed influenced by Heather's narrative, while focusing on rebuilding trust with important stakeholders through continued excellence in my work. 3 weeks after the incident, I finally returned home from my extended stay in the Maldives. Walking through my front door was an emotional experience, the sense of violation still palpable despite the cleaning service that had been through. Seeing the damage firsthand brought home the reality of what had happened, in a way that even the security footage could not fully convey. The process of replacing and repairing physical items was straightforward but time-consuming. Furniture had to be reupholstered or replaced, floors refinished, walls repainted, and broken items identified and ordered. More challenging was the deeper sense of violation that lingered in spaces that had once felt completely safe and private. I implemented comprehensive security upgrades, changing all locks and access codes, and installing additional cameras in vulnerable areas. I reconfigured the entire smart home system to ensure no previous access remained viable. Slowly, I began the process of reclaiming spaces that had felt violated by the intrusion, rearranging furniture, and in some cases, changing the function of rooms to create a fresh start. A supportive friend suggested a sage cleansing ritual, something I would have dismissed as nonsense before this experience. Surprisingly, the symbolic act of purifying the space helped me psychologically reclaim my home, marking a transition from violation back to sanctuary. 6 weeks after the incident, Heather requested a face-to-face meeting. After careful consideration, I agreed, suggesting a neutral coffee shop rather than my home. The confrontation was difficult but necessary. She arrived with what appeared to be a rehearsed speech about miscommunication and overreaction, attempting to minimize her actions and shift partial blame to me. It was just a birthday party, Chip. You always overreact to everything. And you did not have to embarrass me in front of everyone like that. I remained calm but firm, clearly articulating the boundaries she had violated and the consequences of her actions. I laid out in detail the emotional and financial impact of her decision to disregard my explicit refusal. Most importantly, I established clear conditions for any future relationship between us. This is not about one party, Heather. This is about a pattern of disrespect that has gone on for years. Moving forward, our relationship will need to be based on mutual respect and clear boundaries. I am open to rebuilding trust, but that will require real change, not just apologies. Her initial reaction was defensive, cycling through familiar tactics of minimization, guilt, and manipulation. However, as the conversation continued, and she realized I was immovable on these new boundaries, her demeanor gradually shifted. For perhaps the first time, she seemed to recognize that the old patterns would no longer work, that something fundamental had changed in our dynamic. We parted with no dramatic reconciliation, but with clear expectations established. The path to rebuilding our relationship would be long and conditional on sustained behavioral change. I left that meeting with a sense of having finally broken free from destructive patterns that had defined our relationship for decades. 6 months after the disastrous birthday party, my house was fully restored and even improved in many ways. The insurance claim had eventually been partially approved after legal intervention, and I had used the opportunity to upgrade several features that had been damaged. The new security systems were comprehensive, with no shared access of any kind. Each entry point required unique authentication that could not be transferred or duplicated. I had redesigned several spaces completely, particularly those that had felt most violated during the incident. My home office was relocated to a different room with enhanced security features and a completely new layout. The living room furniture was entirely replaced with pieces that had no association with the party, creating a fresh aesthetic that felt fully reclaimed. My home now felt more personal and protected than ever before. I had created clear written property usage policies that I shared with family and friends, establishing explicit expectations for any future visits. There was a new sense of ownership and boundary definition that went beyond physical keys and access codes to the core principle that my space was mine to control. While the physical recovery was relatively straightforward, the emotional healing process was more complex. In the immediate aftermath, I found it difficult to trust even long-standing family members, questioning motivations and watching for signs of boundary violations in every interaction. I began working with a therapist to process the complex family dynamics that had led to this breaking point. Through these sessions, I came to recognize long-standing patterns that had contributed to the situation, patterns that extended back to our childhood and the different expectations placed on each of us. There was genuine grief for the relationship I had wished I had with my sister, the supportive sibling bond that seemed to exist for many of my friends. I had to acknowledge and process this loss before I could move forward with realistic expectations for what our relationship might become. One of the most challenging aspects of the healing journey was working through the guilt I initially felt about setting firm boundaries. Years of family conditioning had instilled a sense of responsibility for Heather's well-being and happiness, making it difficult to prioritize my own needs without feeling selfish. Gradually, I came to understand the difference between helping and enabling, between generosity and self-sacrifice. The journey toward forgiveness was particularly nuanced. I came to understand that forgiveness did not mean forgetting or allowing the same patterns to continue. Rather, it meant releasing the anger that was burdening me while maintaining the wisdom gained from the experience. I could forgive Heather without resuming the same destructive dynamic that had characterized our relationship for years. The incident had lasting effects on my family relationships, but not all of them were negative. My parents slowly began recognizing the enabling patterns they had participated in throughout our lives. My father, in particular, made efforts to understand his role in creating the imbalanced family dynamic. "You know, Chip," he said during one particularly honest conversation, "I think we always expected more from you because you seemed capable of handling it. That was not fair, and I am sorry it took something like this for me to see it." My mother's acknowledgement came more grudgingly, but was meaningful nonetheless. After months of defending Heather's actions, she finally admitted during a phone call she should not have used your house without permission. "You worked hard for what you have." Some family relationships were permanently altered by the incident. A few relatives who had been particularly judgmental or dismissive of my boundaries faded from regular contact, a natural consequence of the shifting family dynamic. Others, who had recognized and supported my position, grew closer through honest communication about family patterns and mutual respect. I developed a new appreciation for the friends who had respected my boundaries throughout the crisis, particularly those who had offered support without judgment. These relationships deepened as I became more authentic about my experiences and needs, no longer feeling obligated to maintain a facade of perfect family harmony. The process of letting go of toxic connections was challenging, but ultimately liberating. I realized that relationships built on obligation rather than mutual respect were draining vital energy that could be directed toward healthier connections. This was not about holding grudges, but about consciously choosing where to invest emotionally. The experience fundamentally changed my approach to all relationships, personal and professional. I developed a clearer understanding of my own values and boundaries, becoming more adept at communicating them early rather than waiting for violations to occur. I found myself more attuned to subtle signs of boundary testing, addressing concerns directly before they could escalate. My ability to identify manipulation tactics improved dramatically, allowing me to recognize and neutralize guilt trips, emotional leverage, and other unhealthy dynamics before they could affect my decisions. This skill proved valuable not just in family situations, but in professional negotiations and social relationships as well. My contact with Heather remained limited and conditional in the months following our confrontation. We spoke occasionally, primarily through text messages, with in-person meetings happening only in group settings with clear time boundaries. To my surprise, she did begin showing small signs of more respectful behavior, though whether this represented genuine growth or simply adaptation to new circumstances remained to be seen. She no longer made financial requests, seemingly accepting that this resource was no longer available to her. She asked permission before sharing any information about me with others, a small but significant change from her previous pattern. Most notably, she occasionally acknowledged past behavior without prompting, suggesting at least some level of reflection. "I know I have not always been fair to you," she said during one brief phone call. "I am trying to do better." My parents continued their journey toward better understanding of healthy family boundaries, though progress was inconsistent and often circuitous. My father made more significant strides, occasionally acting as a buffer between my mother's expectations and my new boundaries. My mother struggled more with the changing dynamic, but made efforts to respect the new parameters of our relationship. As old traditions that had often devolved into obligation and resentment fell away, new ones emerged with the supportive family members and friends who formed my chosen community. These gatherings were characterized by mutual respect and genuine connection rather than performance of familial roles, creating space for authentic relationships to flourish. My professional life stabilized and then thrived in the aftermath of the crisis. Free from the constant drain of dysfunctional family dynamics, I found renewed energy and focus for creative problem-solving and innovation at work. The boundaries I had established created space for excellence in all areas of my life, leading to new opportunities and recognition. Through it all, I developed a deeper sense of peace and self-respect than I had ever experienced. The knowledge that I could establish and maintain healthy boundaries, even in the face of significant pressure and potential loss, created a foundation of confidence that extended to all aspects of my life. Looking back on the experience from the perspective of 6 months, I had come to see the birthday party incident not as a family catastrophe, but as a necessary catalyst for long overdue change. The pain and disruption had served a purpose, forcing honest examination of patterns that might otherwise have continued indefinitely. The journey had led me to a deeper understanding of what family truly means. I had learned that genuine love must be built on a foundation of respect, that healthy relationships require both compassion and boundaries. Blood connections create potential for meaningful bonds, but cannot substitute for the mutual respect that makes those bonds worthwhile. I recognized that relationships sometimes need to be redefined, rather than repaired in their original form. My relationship with Heather would never be the idealized sibling bond I had once hoped for, but it could potentially evolve into something healthier, based on realistic expectations and clear boundaries. As I sat on my newly designed deck overlooking the Sound, I felt genuine gratitude for the difficult lessons that had led to a better life. The crisis had forced growth that might never have happened otherwise, painful but ultimately transformative. The door remained open for continued healing and evolution in all my family relationships, but now it was a door I controlled, with clear conditions for entry. I looked toward the future with optimism and strength, knowing that whatever challenges arose, I now had the tools and clarity to meet them on my own terms. What would you do if a family member crossed your boundaries like my sister did? Would you have handled it differently? Comment below with your thoughts, and do not forget to like and subscribe if you appreciated this story about standing up for yourself. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the hardest boundaries to set are the ones we need the most.